For the purpose of today's afternoon discussion, I'm going to ask Professor Harris, who, as you know, I've sent you biographical material, is a professor of philosophy at Purdue University in the United States, in just outside Indianapolis. Temba Jackie Shandu, who isn't here yet, we don't know where he is, and Mdu Memela were three of the students who were on the panel when we were at Philosophy Born of Struggle for its 20th commemoration meeting at Purdue. I was one of the keynote speakers with Cornel West and Lewis Gordon, and it was really a privilege for us to be there and to also share and learn from other students and other people as to the 20 years of Philosophy Born of Struggle. And not only that, but some of us had also read the collection on PDF. Professor Leonard Harris edited that collection, Philosophy Born of Struggle, and there is now going to be a new introduction to that collection. And I think it certainly was for me then, and it continues to be a learning experience in terms of how particular philosophers in the United States, African Americans who have not only carved and shaped the face of Afrikaner philosophy, but also Black existentialism, and then Philosophy Born of Struggle.
Some were moral suasionists who believe that what you should do is to practice moral persuasion to convince other people that they should change their minds. But everybody's not a moral suasionist. Frederick Douglass, for example, was a moral suasionist for most of his life, but not for reasons of religiosity. For political reasons, he thought it was the most efficacious way to go. David Walker was an insurrectionist. He knew that enslaved insurrections almost always fail. His appeal to the colored citizens of the world in 1823 argued that slaves not only have a right to rebel, they should rebel. To overthrow slavery, they have an entitlement to participate in violence to end the condition of servitude. They have an entitlement, not only that, they can't really be free or have a sense of self-worth unless they do. Self-degradation, he thought, was a condition of servitude. It's a wretched condition. What is it to do philosophy? And that means, what is to say something about the nature of the universe? What is it to say something about the nature of the world? What is it to say something about what counts as human freedom, independent of any particular location? What does justice mean? Such that what it is that these voices have to say is something that everybody else could believe.
We can't have a conversation that is ahistorical, that does not take into account that there are people who have come here uninvited, committed genocide, displaced people from their land, and destroyed their identity, their culture, and a big part of their culture is their language. So we can't talk about decolonization and the reconstruction of the continent of Africa and want to debate the issue of repositioning African languages.
Isn't there some kind of appeal that we can make to a common currency of humanity beyond?
We'll give Prof. Harris a chance to respond. So I'm going to leave out a whole lot of the philosophy born of massacre. There are some, I think, points that people thought would be very contentious when I wrote it. And one of that is to use what we say in South Africa, the K word. I also write fiction, and so I brought together ways in which, as a child growing up in the Cape, from a Xhosa grandfather, what that meant to come to that realization, because nobody had told me that my grandfather was Xhosa. And also to reckon with the fact that this is not a word that we use with ease in South Africa. At the same time, we are also socialized to be afraid of it, to treat it as though we can't say it, we mustn't say it, we're the devil's child if we do. And that's in some way also giving in to this notion that it doesn't happen. It does happen. Black men and black women are separated constantly. It's part of daily life in South Africa, where you have the human, the intellectual black person who is a thinking person, of course, who forgives, first and foremost, who forgives, who's rational, who's nice, who's gracious, who understands that we cannot live in the past, so to speak. So that distinction between still seeing the black man as the native, that there's still that kafir within the black man that has to be killed, has to be uprooted.
Defining gender and describing gender is actually quite difficult for people. It's a word we encounter all the time. In fact, when you're filling out government forms, they will ask you your gender, and you have to fill that out. Well, I'm not sure if you have to fill it out, but it's usually recommended that you do. Somehow it's important. But people don't actually know how to talk or describe gender. And I found that even within research that is on gender-based violence, there are many researchers who also struggle with the notion of gender and its importance within that particular context, and in this particular context, armed conflict.
The Rhodes Must Fall and the George Must Fall campaign was undergirded by the imagination of a decolonized space, and more particularly, what a decolonized university looked like. What is its nature? How does it behave? How is it organized? How is it managed? How does it feel? What are its values and beliefs? And a decolonized university and a decolonized space is a space that positively enhances your existential experiences as a human being. Now, usually the language of decolonization is charged with being a collection of rhetoric idioms that have no workable objectives.
Now, we're looking to our own philosophy. You find that the introduction, which is written by Prof. Harris, around the 1865 in particular, you have the pressing issues there he knows are slave labor and labor of wages. But here, there was a huge different thing happening, which I'm about to mention. But before I do so, I want to look at the definition of philosophy by Derrida. I quote, "Philosophy is always nationally present. Usually we think philosophy is a universal discourse, and it crosses the borders of languages, nations, and it claims to address universal problems. But in fact, not only do we know that philosophy as such, philosophy in a strict sense was in the beginning linked to determining cities, languages. From the very beginning, philosophy was determined by a cultural, historical, and national or ethical context. When modern forms of nationalism appeared in Europe in the 19th century, it was not in non-philosophical form. Every nationalism, every national affirmation takes the form of a philosophy." Now I'll take this definition of a philosophy and look at our own situation. Obviously here we have, in the Howard College you have philosophy from first year, second year, and third years. It is Western. You hear a little bit of African philosophy.